Hello and welcome to Inside Events, a new international contemporary podcast focused on key issues in events and festivals. This week, I'm joined by Dr. Meng, and we're going to be talking about social revitalization and the role of events for that. Welcome, Meng. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, organization, and why are you interested in social revitalization and the role of events for doing that?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Everybody call me Mo in a simple form. I'm currently working as associate professor and vice director in the Center for Advanced Tourism Study, Hokkaido University. I'm also involved with a little bit of island study, managing the island culture research initiative called Secret. We also organize some conference. So by answering your first question, right, why I'm interested in this concept. So the first concept, first two concepts, one is art, one is tourism. So it's happened very often under the festival and event lenses. That's why events provide a kind of a special form of travel through art. Because we know normally people go to art gallery because there's exhibition, not because the white box always sitting there. So events make the art type of tourism very special. And the second point I want to mention, the festival and event are one of the most unsustainable tourism activities. So it's very often it's happening in one short period and create a huge amount of visitation. How can we make events, especially art events, more sustainable is a very challenging question. And my research, third point of this answer, my research mainly focused on the rural or regional or island setting. In Japan, is a post-growth kind of a society facing the depopulation issue. Then the government kind of really hope art event can revitalize the rural society. That's how all this kind of thing between art, tourism, and rural revitalization all connected under the event kind of lenses. So I'm focused on creative events, both big and small.
Yeah. That's great, Meng. And for those that are unfamiliar with the concept of social revitalization, could you tell us a little bit more of what you mean by that?
All right. Yes, a little bit explanation about this term because we often talk about sustainable tourism from culture, social, economic, and environmental, those old pillars. But from my study, I found out tourism has a power to enhance community, especially by bringing entrepreneurship back to the rural places. So in that case, it's not just a success for visitation, for how wonderful the art and festival experiences. It's also about how many new business emerging in the very peripheral regions. So they are not just tourism businesses; they also create a role as a social enterprise. So it's very valuable for community to receive this kind of multi-phase business and social enterprise. So in this under this background, I call it social revitalization in general. So it's not just sustainable tourism. It's more like a sustainable tourism plus community revitalization, two terms in one.
And if we think about why we should care about this particular term, Meng, I think it's obvious in one sense that it's about revitalizing society, economies, providing opportunities for entrepreneurs, small businesses, art galleries, etc. But why would you suggest that people should take this subject seriously and care about it?
Yes, great question. Because we all get used to this kind of gallery, Trinali, Biennale exhibitions happen in the urban places, like Venice Biennale, for example. It's like everybody have to go there to worship. But Venice is a city. Even this city is very special. Have a very limited carrying capacity, but it's tourism city. But in my case, I'm talking about resource constrained community, where often 2/3 of the population are retired or aging people. Imagine a town, 1/3 of people are 80 years old. That's my field workplaces. So it's very slow changing, peripheral, lack of anything, resources, development, also innovation mindset. So we need changes. So art can bring creative people, and creative people can make change. So the art itself might not provide so much changes, but those people can. So it also brings young people from the urban places, from other countries. They bring kind of innovation ideas. So they share this same kind of resources, bring direct, also indirect kind of influence to the community. So if the community also well adapt these changes and the social kind of innovation ideas, so they can facilitate the environment, allow co-creation and co-benefit. In the good cases, art can be a catalyst and provide opportunity, at least for people to start thinking. Change is the last kind of outcome, but start to rethinking the issue is very important. I hope I answered that.
No, that's really well. And when I was doing research on Tokyo 2020 and looking at economic and social development in and around that, one of the central problems was the social withdrawal symptoms that we sometimes see in Japan, the hikikomori.
Yes.
Does this social phenomenon is this solved or helped by some of the efforts that you're talking about now?
Yeah, it's happened. Creativity happened in a very different way. We have this kind of socially engaged art festival happening in rural, but in many other communities, they also have this kind of new form of content tourism. Animes and pop culture also try to focus on everyday's life, engage with community issues. So art tourism may be more shift from elite type of the culture form into a pop form or everyday form. And the everyday kind of art, like anime manga, this kind of art also try to cover other kind of social area. So it's very interesting. I think it's also make Japan very special, this two type of tourism, because in other context, in Europe and America, they still aim for urban places. We can find a big creative cluster, culture quarters, art district in the urban area, but in the rural area, from a geographic perspective, I think Japan as well as Australia is currently doing really well. Yeah.
That's a good point. For example, in the UK, the rural areas are one thing, the urban areas are another, and there doesn't, apart from kind of small local artisanal
Right.
types of kind of art, sculpting, etc. There isn't a huge amount inside inside these rural areas, apart from kind of it's almost kind of a different sort of culture and heritage.
Right.
With manor houses and various national trust properties and English heritage properties. So it's almost kind of a slightly different sort of thing than strictly an art thing that you spoke about. Meng, if you think about where the concept of social revitalization has come over the years and where it's going to go in terms of future trends, is there anything that you could say in terms of that?
Okay, first, where it's come from? I think this concept is arise from rural studies because most of the series from rural study focus on 10 or 15 years ago is focused on rural development. But for the most of the global north country, everybody is facing the post-growth issue. So we cannot continue growth or develop anymore. So therefore, very recent decade, we started talking about revitalization. But a lot of development theory are kind of a urban-based theory. But in terms of revitalization, we have to really think about things very carefully because from economic point of view, for example, we can't evaluate rural area through the urban kind of way because when you talk about urban, it's a dot, it's a centered city in the middle of the map. But when we talk about rural, it means everywhere else. There is no specific kind of characteristic you can describe rural because everywhere else is different. So under that kind of concept, we can see where this kind of concept developed for future because I think three perspective. One is creative entrepreneurship is one thing because I see a lot of creative people, artists, writer, photographer, they come to the rural area, the they bring changes. They are crazy, young, and innovative. They are facing a slow, stubborn, and boring people and aging people. So they bring changes. So this is very important. If they can find a way to coping with very limited resources, also transform their previous experiences from the city into the local context, they are amazing. They can also shape networks. So they're not just one person. Very often they are gathered together, like an art village or music kind of festival town or something. You can see a group of creative cluster. So second, I would want to say, especially after COVID-19, I observed small actually bring a more diversified changes. And a regenerative approach require we have a more diversified type of events and festivals happening in small communities instead of having a very big model kind of thing to represent all the rural or copy and paste it. So that's the third thing I want to focus. There is no model exists in our type of event and festival because all the rural communities are different. We can't use a model because everybody is different. So that's the thing. We're still using art and festival model to apply on this kind of research. So I would say it's very dangerous. And I think, yeah, if we can satisfy all stakeholders, especially this kind of creative entrepreneur and become local resident, we can definitely organize events very substantive. They share a vision for the future. And for the theoretical trend, I think we need a large case study also through a geographic focus because now everybody is like a very successful case study. Then they try to summarize this is something like a theory, but that's not right. Some art festival works for this town, but it's not worked for another town. So we need to work harder to know the reason. I think that's what the researcher need to really be careful about for future festival, especially art events. Uh, what kind of research issues they might overcome. That's some
It's really
humble
interesting.
opinion from my experience.
No, that's great. Yeah, Mo, your work's really interesting, and
Mm,
what I always thought about it was the key question that I probably got is how similar or different is urban regeneration through events and the clustering of these creative communities. I've done stuff in urban settings, and the
mm,
way that you describe moving out into the rural areas to regenerate through events and
mm.
festivals and all that sort of thing. That there's quite a lot of similarities in
Right.
some sense. Obviously, kind of the 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 search for cheap spaces in urban areas is a lot more difficult than in rural areas. In mainly a lot of well-developed cities, it's about kind of
Mm,
populating um, post-industrial
yeah.
buildings, areas that
Mm,
might be brownfield, areas that might be less commercially viable to apartment blocks because of previous industrial activity.
mhm,
Is there quite a lot of similarities in terms of the types of people and approach between the
mm.
urban and rural, or is it really different?
Right. Yeah, I think now I want to add in one point from my observation, especially for artists, no matter music or visual art, I found out they really like to connect rural and urban into one setting because they need a rural, this kind of utopia, feeling quiet to create art, but at the same time, they need an audience. So they still have to attract urban people or even global tourists to come to this place to see their artwork. So I see artists without both sides, they kind of feeling very difficult. So I really see some artists spending their weekend to open a event on some community, but at the weekday they go back to city because they still need some income and resources and inspiration with other artists. I see rural become more relational under the context of art event, project, and festival. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine that, and
Mm,
by studying some of the destination marketing, place promotion, place reimaging stuff that Japan did in the lead
mhm,
up to post Fukushima, in the lead up to the Tokyo 20 Games, which didn't happen in obviously 2020. Um,
mm,
there was a huge rethinking of what Japan had to offer to the international community through a whole range of campaigns. It was marvelous to watch. Actually,
Right.
really interesting to watch. Obviously, we wrote about the downsides of that with over tourism and this absolute saturation of tourists
Yeah.
inside populations and communities that were not healthy. But
Mm.
do you think, on the whole, that hosting Tokyo 2020 helped the social revitalization cause that you're talking about, or do you think it slightly
Yeah.
hindered it?
Of course, the Tokyo Olympic is a very big thing. We know this kind of how people really treat this as an opportunity and also like a symbolic opportunity for the whole tourism industry. Now, what actually happened is because of COVID-19, as I know, half of the hotel industry bankrupt at the first year at 2020 in some Fukushima prefecture, for example. That I read from the news. I was shocked. So it's not like after COVID people will immediately recover that. So it's a huge damage for Japan for sure. Yes, it did create a big impact, especially we have a Olympic without any visitors. So everybody just watching TV and imagine the loss of this revenue, but they still need to finish it. So it's a very special case, I would say. From a social revitalization perspective, it do somehow make those destinations, especially for the small destination, to rethink about how how unstable this kind of supply chain for tourism for them. If they can't find the resources within their region to allow regional tourists to visit each other, I think that's what they learned. Actually, at the second year, 2021, a lot of Japanese started to travel within the area they live. So it's like before COVID, people travel like a local because they all want to experience what local people experience, like which restaurant local people go. But after the or during the COVID-19, 2021, the Japanese travel like a foreigner. They retravel the destination they're familiar with, but in a very different mindset. I would say it's very interesting thing. But now it's kind of recover back to normal. But it's definitely for them to rethinking what is resilience under this concept of social revitalization.
That's really interesting. And so in the UK and in the US,
Mhm,
I believe that there's post-COVID, there's been a influx of people out of cities into regional areas. We went to
mhm,
San Francisco about 2 months
mhm,
ago, and San
mhm.
Francisco was almost dead. A lot
Yeah,
of people
yeah.
had moved out because they were just unhappy paying high rents. And
Mm,
they've moved out to kind of some of the suburbs whereby they can have a better quality of life in the more rural
mm,
areas.
yeah.
Same in the UK. Was that trend also seen in Japan? And did that help, therefore, the rural revitalization, or is it hard to tell?
Uh, I think it's not completely finished yet. I mean, the COVID-19 officially finished, but the impact for tourism industry is not finished yet. I think I don't know the tourism in general, but I can really see a transformation of big scale art festival and small scale art festival. They kind of reversed after the COVID-19. Before the big scale event museum, they always have a confidence they can receive. For example, one of the biggest art festivals, Revitalisation in Japan, they receive million tourists per year. They never promote too much because they know everybody will come. But during the COVID, it's like the tourists suddenly disappear. Nobody willing to travel to see art anymore. Instead, they like to join local festivals, local events, craft markets, artisan market. So because it's safe, it's outside, and also it's easy to organize small group of people. So in this case, suddenly small become really a new big, and I would say still it's quite popular to boom this kind of marché in Japanese context. It means the craft or food market is getting more popular. Also, the camping and glamping is getting more popular. People want to stay outside a little bit more. Then the artists, they also try to organize more workshop-based events instead of organizing this kind of gallery, visiting, looking this kind of experiences. I can see this kind of transformation. It's very cool, actually.
That's really interesting. Thanks,
Mm.
Men. We will wrap it up there. We're now at the 20 minute mark, but thank you so much for coming on Inside Events, and we can have a chat afterwards and add some resources underneath
Okay.
the podcast when I've published it online if people are interested in knowing a little bit more. So thank you so much for coming on Inside Events, and hopefully we'll have you back on in the future.
Right. Thank you very much for having me.